Freedom, man. That's what it's all about. You've got to groove on freedom, like the good book says.
Welcome. You are listening to What on Earth is Happening. This show will discuss the topics of human consciousness, mind control, natural law, the occult, and all issues that affect the freedom of the people of Earth. What on Earth is Happening will endeavor to shine light upon the darkness of our world and to offer empowering solutions to the problems we face as humanity approaches its critical moment of choice. And now, here is your host, Mark Passio.
Welcome one and all, you're listening to What on Earth is Happening right here on Republic Broadcasting. I'm your host, Mark Passio. My website, whatonearthishappening.com. The network's website, of course, republicbroadcasting.org. The show is live every Saturday evening from 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. Eastern Time, from 9 p.m. to midnight Central. Today is Saturday, January 31st, 2015. We have a great show lined up for you here tonight. We're going to be continuing to talk about what I call the elephant in the room, a topic that many people do not want to bring up and discuss because of its controversial nature. Mind control specifically targeted at women to foment the war between the sexes that we're witnessing in our society. I'm going to be discussing Neo-Feminism, continuing to discuss Neo-Feminism as we started last week. This will be an ongoing series. Neo-Feminism as a eugenics operation, what I call Epi-Eugenics. I believe it's a term that I have coined myself. It's epigenetic eugenics. It is genetics that is waged through mind control of the population, essentially getting them to cull their own numbers. And we are indeed seeing that take place before our eyes. If people don't understand that that's what's going on, they really need to sit up and pay attention to what I'm talking about in this series. I'll give the call-in number right here at the top of the show. I may take calls in the third hour of the show. Last week I did not get around to taking calls because I wanted to stay focused on the information. Hopefully we'll have some time to take some calls in the third hour. The call-in number to join us here on What on Earth is Happening, 800-313-9443. Once again, the call-in number to join us if you want to get in the caller queue now, 800-313-9443. Also, I may go to the phones to ask the listening audience a question during tonight's broadcast. So if you're willing to, maybe answer a question that I would like to pose, just to put some food for thought out there for the listeners tonight, call in the call-in number, and I may go to you to get your take on something. So, a couple of quick event announcements before we jump in with the topic for tonight. The Free Your Mind 3 conference, of course, coming up here in the Philadelphia area, April 10th, 11th, and 12th of 2015 at the Sheraton Bucks County Hotel at 400 North Oxford Valley Road in Langhorne, Pennsylvania, just outside the city limits of Philadelphia. The speakers lined up for this great conference coming up in April: Bob Tuskin, Clint Richardson, Curtis the Illuminated One Davis, Dennis McKenna, Derek Brose, the New Jersey Weedman Ed Fortune, Frater X, Freeman, Fritz Springmeyer, Jay Parker, Janice Barcello, John Bush, John Vibes, Josie the Outlaw Wales, Laura Eisenhower, Lennon Honor, Luke Rudkowski, Mark Devlin, myself, Mark Passio, and Stuart Swerdlow. There will also be an anti-media panel. There will be a panel discussion group with many of the speakers that are taking part in the conference, and there will be open mic night sessions at the end of each evening. An all-weekend pass for the Free Your Mind 3 conference coming up just outside of Philadelphia in April. $150. You can get your tickets online at freeyourmindconference.com. The best way to support this great conference that's coming up here in Philadelphia in April is to buy your tickets in advance. This is the biggest conference of its kind on the East Coast coming up this year, most certainly, with a who's who speaker lineup. So if you want to support this event, get your tickets in advance. That's how the organizers are able to pay for the venue. That's how they're able to pay for the speaker travel arrangements and the speaker lodging arrangements for this great event. freeyourmindconference.com. Get your tickets now. Philadelphia Liberty on the Rocks presents a special presentation by myself, Mark Passio, on the true meaning and purpose of the Second Amendment. This is going to be taking place Tuesday, February 10th, 2015, from 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time at the Cafe. The Cafe is located at 2011 Walnut Street in Philadelphia, 20th and Walnut. This event is free to attend, and I will be I'm going to be doing what I call field stripping the Second Amendment. I'm going to break it down into all of its constituent elements and explain to people exactly what was meant and intended by the founders and the co-authors of the Second Amendment. And I'm going to then reassemble the Second Amendment on the other side of that field stripping to help people to very clearly see its true meaning and purpose as it was originally intended, instead of these new interpretations that people tried to ascribe to it that had absolutely nothing to do with its intent. So this is coming up February 10th, Tuesday, February 10th, 6 to 9 p.m. The presentation will not be all 3 hours. There will be a question and answer session and a discussion after the presentation. So for more information on this event, you can go to philadelphia.libertyontherocks.org. They also have a meetup group, Philadelphia Liberty on the Rocks. I will be taking part in what is called a Counter Protocol of Light event. This is going to be held during around the time of the halftime show of the Super Bowl tomorrow, Sunday, February 1st, 2015, at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. This event will be hosted by Scott Bartle and Deborah Peicht of ShiftIsHappeningTV.com. The website is ShiftIsHappeningTV.com. The other members of the panel, of the discussion panel, will be Sean Stone, Freeman, John Ramirez, Jamie Hanshaw, Sarah Adams, and Patrick Henningsen. So a really great panel discussion group, and they're also going to do energy work as well during this event, the Counter Protocol of Light. We're going to be basically breaking down what they do during these Super Bowl halftime rituals, which is what they are, why they do them, and what the intended effects on the mindset of the population is. That's basically what this panel discussion is going to be on. And the hosts intend to basically counteract that dark and negative energy with an event like this to raise awareness and to help people to basically shield themselves against this type of ritualistic energy that is being sent by these dark occultists that organize rituals like this. These Super Bowl halftime shows are very clearly ritualistic, and they're definitely put together in order to steer consciousness in a certain direction. So once again, Counter Protocol of Light event, Sunday, February 1st, 2015, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and we'll go through the Super Bowl halftime show. And you could check that out at ShiftIsHappeningTV.com. One of the panel members, Freeman, will also be hosting me. He has put together this question and answer session because I just appeared on his show, The Free Zone. And I'll be doing a question and answer session with him on Monday, February 2nd. I'll tell you a little bit more about that on the other side of this break. Stay with us. Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening here on RBN. I'm your host, Mark Passio. My website, whatonearthishappening.com. Before the break, the first break hit us, I was talking about an event I'm doing with Freeman of freemantv.com. He'll be hosting a question and answer session with me called Ask an Ex-Satanist Anything. This came about as a result of me being on his show, The Free Zone, just yesterday. So he wanted to put together a question and answer session for his listening audience. And this will be taking place Monday, February 2nd at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. 4 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday, February 2nd. You can get more information about this Q&A session that I'll be doing with Freeman and his listeners on freemantv.com. Check out Freeman's website, freemantv.com. There are still What on Earth is Happening promotional t-shirts available as a free gift in return for a voluntary donation to What on Earth is Happening. You can click the email link that's listed in the news article at the top of the news section on the whatonearthishappening.com website to get more information about how to receive a What on Earth is Happening promotional t-shirt. There's also a donation button on the left-hand side of the What on Earth is Happening website. If you feel that you've received value from the information that has been shared on my website and on this radio show, you could feel free to make a voluntary donation to help support my work so that I can continue it into the future. With that having been said, I'd like to direct everybody's attention to the whatonearthishappening.com radio show page. Underneath the page during the live show, there are always images for tonight's show listed. The images there tonight are just about the events that are coming up. The Free Your Mind 3 conference, my Second Amendment presentation at Liberty on the Rocks coming up on February 10th, the Counter Protocol of Light event at the halftime of the Super Bowl, and the Ask an Ex-Satanist Anything event that I'll be doing with Freeman on Monday. So I don't have any images for the material that I have been covering and will continue to cover because I haven't really organized this officially as a presentation. I will more likely than not do that at some point in the future and have slides prepared for such a presentation on this topic. But for now, this is going to remain sort of a stream of consciousness type thing where I'm basically going along with a general outline of topics that I want to touch on when it comes to this dynamic of neo-feminism as a eugenics operation, what I call an example of epi-eugenics. You know, eugenics could be carried out a number of ways. It could be done physically, it could be done chemically, you know, it could be done basically through forced sterilization, things like that. But I think the social engineers have ratcheted up their game to a very significant level, and they are doing it epigenetically. They're not doing it physically anymore. Eugenics is being waged through mind control, and that's what I call epi-eugenics. Epi-eugenics. The concept that you can get a population ultimately to want to cull itself. And this is what we're really seeing happening. There's so many first of all, how I want to basically transition into this, going back into all the topics we were touching on last week, is to reiterate that when I bring this up, the war between the sexes and mind control that is specifically targeted at women in our culture, especially in Western culture, I'm not trying to further divide the sexes. I'm trying to heal the divide by bringing awareness about how this is a Hegelian dialectic, that mechanism that has been put into play in our society. And in any dialectical manipulation, only one side ultimately needs to take the bait. Only one side needs to buy into the lie of the dialectic in order for the dialectic manipulation to work, to have effect on the whole society. I give the example oftentimes, let's say a student in a classroom wanted to start a conflict between two other students, okay? And the two students are sitting next to each other in the class. Well, one student may be going by one of them and smack them in the back of the head and then, quickly pass. And, the one student that got hit in the back of the head turns to the other student and looks at them as if they did it. And really what the student who struck the first individual in the back of the head was trying to do is to get that person to think that the other student did it. Well, the second student does not have to be involved in the manipulation. Only the first student has to buy the notion that that other student hit them in the back of the head when in fact it was the person who walked by, and then a conflict can start between those people, and that person who got hit will think the whole time, oh, that person did this, and I'm just responding to that. And then oftentimes if they do something harsh or violent to that other person, then that person's going to respond, even though they didn't intend any harshness or any conflict with that other person. You see, that's what I mean by only one side of a dialectic needs to buy the lie for the dialectical manipulation to be accomplished. If the first intended target of the manipulation doesn't see through the lie, the conflict can easily begin. And that's what we've already seen in our society as a result of neo-feministic beliefs. So we started breaking this down last week, and I tried to explain to people that I would not be willing to take a chance on alienating a huge portion of my listening audience and people that I've tried to get to understand the dynamics that are really happening in the world if this topic were not real and critically important, if it were not something that is absolutely essential to understand. Okay? So last week we touched on a whole lot of different dynamics when it came to this problem that we're facing in society of what I call neo-feminism. And I label it that to distinguish it from classical feminism, which is simply about equal rights under natural law and women being respected as much as men in society, being treated as equals. I don't have any problem with that. I think both sexes should be treated with fairness and dignity and as equals as far as our rights are concerned, our rights under natural law. This does not mean that the sexes are the same, of course. And this is the part of the neo-feminist agenda is to androgynize the sexes, to masculinize women and to feminize men so that there is a blending and indistinguishable aspect when it comes to the sexes. That's what they want. They want androgyny. And what this does is it weakens the masculine instinct in men. And it makes them into what I call the inauthentic man. Okay, the corporate man. And then what it does is it also makes women more masculinized and more wed to the state. The idea of domination having to be present, okay? Having to have a part in our lives. Government, the acceptance of government. And you see this so prevalently in modern society when it comes to the fact that most women are still statists. Now, that doesn't mean most men aren't, okay? Most men are still statists as well. But I asked people as an introduction to this topic, just think about the ratio difference in the so-called truth movement between men, truth seekers and truth tellers, okay, who are putting information out into the world and part of the alternative media versus how many women are involved in that. And it's not to say that there are no women involved in that process of doing that great work, but it's the ratio is so overwhelmingly imbalanced that I think anybody being honest with themselves can easily see that. And I think we should be asking ourselves the question, why is it that way? We'll pick up right there on the other side of this break. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening. Stay with us. Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening here on Republic Broadcasting. I'm your host, Mark Passio. My website, whatonearthishappening.com. Continuing to get into the topic for tonight, we're talking about Neo-Feminism as a Epi-Eugenics operation, as a way of ultimately culling the human population by getting people to war between the sexes. And we're seeing that already play out in our society, and it has been playing out in our society for decades since this agenda has been brought in by think tanks and Marxist and socialist movements. You know, we talked about that briefly last week, all the different institutions that are part of this. You know, a lot of this neo-feminism was ushered directly into our society by the Frankfurt School, part of Gramsci's plan of the long march through the cultural institutions. People should look up Antonio Gramsci and understand incremental socialism, creeping socialism, you know, the total creeping incrementalist control of the state. Look up the Fabian Society. You know, that's another think tank organization that is all about slowly bringing in the destruction of the authentic man and the authentic woman in our society, so that the androgenized versions, the husks or shells of the former authentic man and authentic woman can basically be cannon fodder for the state and are easy to manipulate and control at that point. All the other think tank involvements, you know, it goes up higher than even these organizations. These are like the political aspects of it. You know, you have like the Council on Foreign Relations and the Rockefeller Foundation. You know, again, political driven aspects of this here in the United States. And then you have things like the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations, which is all about mind control and social engineering and eugenics. Those organizations grew out of Chatham and Wellington House in England. You know, and then of course you have the Club of Rome, which to me is probably one of the highest think tanks that's directly involved with this agenda, because they are entirely about eugenics and population reduction. You know, and then you have to explore the connections between all of this and, you know, organized religion. So it has very deep roots, and it's ultimately all about control. It's not about anything else. It never has been about anything else. It's about control and making the population more manageable through reducing its numbers. Another thing you have to understand is dark occultism plays into this directly. I'm going to make a statement here and folks get as offended about this statement as you want. The Neo-Feminism Agenda is derived directly out of satanic ideology. It comes out of Satanism. And one of the books that I highly recommend people to read when it comes to understanding the direct manipulation of the male mind in society is The Satanic Witch by Anton LaVey. A very little known book. Hardly anybody I know has ever read this book. And I think it's absolutely critical. It's a critical book to read to understand what's really going on in society. You know, this is it's a guidebook, if you will. It's an instruction manual for the Neo-Feminist Agenda as far as I'm concerned. You know, and, you know, look, here's all you really have to deeply grasp at first. The social engineers who have constructed this agenda want the vast majority of women, and again, I'm going to make generalizations when I talk about this, all right? I'm going to use terms like the vast majority of, and if you're uncomfortable with that, like I said last week, turn the show off now, okay? I'm not interested in whether people get offended by, generalized statements. To understand this, you need to use generalizations. So I'm going to use most, almost all, almost every, the vast majority of, and if you're uncomfortable with that, tough. Okay? So the vast majority of women are being manipulated by this agenda, by them being essentially told and buying into the idea that what life is really about, folks, is pleasure and comfort and, you know, your daily pursuits. You know, the idea of the whole pursuit of happiness, very ambiguous terminology, okay? Rights are left at the door when it comes to this mentality, all right? It's about me, 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 all day, every day. I try to explain to people that if I could explain to you what Satanism really is, when you say the term, everybody's mind goes to the idea of the Christian devil, you know, the red devil with the horns and the pitchfork and the tail, okay? This has little to zero to do with what I am calling Satanism, okay? Ideological Satanism, in which, and maybe this is a good time to explain this because we're talking about the connection between the Neo-Feminist Agenda and Satanism. Satanists chose the name Satan because of the archetypal connection to the Christian adversary or opposer. That which is the adversary or opposer, which is what Satan means in Hebrew, to the Christ consciousness, to the higher consciousness, the higher mind, the connection to the higher self, the real savior of the world, which is making that connection to higher self and higher consciousness, and really being aware of what's going on within us and around us. Okay, Satanists chose that image because what they are trying to do is destroy that higher consciousness. Keep people in a state of low vibratory consciousness so that they can be controlled and therefore ruled and put into slavery and bondage. You know, as such, they're the adversaries of that Christ consciousness. You know, they don't want that type of consciousness rising in our society. They want to keep it quelled. So that's the reason they chose that. However, the ideology of Satanism has nothing to do with the worship of the Christian devil, the concept of the Christian devil. It is about pure selfishness being the highest aspiration in life. If I could encapsulate what satanic ideology is in a nutshell, it's waking up in the morning, and from the minute you wake up until the time you go to sleep that night, you aren't thinking about anything but yourself and what you could do to improve your own situation, and you never ever think about anybody else's situation. You never have any compassion for the suffering of other people in the world. You don't look at the world in a wider sense. You don't look at the injustices that are going on in the world in any kind of a wider sense. All you are doing is focused on me, 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 all day, every day. That is Satanism. That's what Satanism is, and I'm not asking you to believe or accept that's what Satanism is. I'm telling you definitively and factually as a former priest of this religion that is in fact what Satanism is. Period, the end. And it doesn't make a difference whether you accept it or believe it or not. You know? Like I've said, if you want to know about any religion, you would probably want to go to the priest of that religion and ask them about it. Well, I was a former priest of Satanism, and I'm telling you that's what the religion is. Period. Now, when you think about that, how many people in society qualify as Satanists? And out of those people, how many of them are women? And I admit just about as many are probably men, but I'm telling you this is heavily, heavily, heavily marketed and peddled to women in society. And there's a reason for that. To get the moral decay of a society going, you have to get the women's mind first. You absolutely have to get their minds first. Because largely they're the people who are quote-unquote raising children. And I say quote-unquote because the parenting in our society is a joke. It's a joke. And women want to bear children, but they don't want to raise them properly. You know, because they weren't raised properly. And largely neither were the men that they're associating with at all. And I'll tell you that just from my perspective. I talked about this last week. I wasn't raised properly by my parents. I wasn't raised by my parents, period. Like I said last week, my real family, the people who really truly raised me, are people I don't know personally in my life, in person. They were people who communicated through their writings and through other forms of media what real morality is about. And we have way too few quote-unquote parents doing that job. They're failing miserably at it. And that comes directly out of the mind control that most women undergo. We'll continue to talk about this dynamic on the other side of this break. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening here on RBN. We'll be right back, folks. Stay with us.
There's a code of silence that we don't dare speak. There's a wall between us and a river so deep. We keep pretending that there's nothing wrong. There's a code of silence and it can't go on.
Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening here on RBN. I'm your host, Mark Passio. My website, whatonearthishappening.com. Before the break, I was talking about how Neo-Feminism grew directly out of the Satanic ideology. And there's no better evidence of that than the book The Satanic Witch by Anton LaVey, which I highly recommend everybody reading to understand a lot of the manipulation tactics that are really being used against men and how men are really being emasculated in this society. Controllers don't want any strong men in society because strong men are the only people who... Strong, informed, and enlightened men are the only ones who are really going to wage any kind of physical resistance against tyranny of tyrannical government in society. Now, it's not to say that women would not be able to ideologically come out of their trance and understand the tyranny that's in place, but when it comes to any kind of possible necessity for physical action, certainly men are going to be more likely than not the individuals who are going to be taking that action. That's why it's so important to get men completely emasculated in society. And this whole idea of the destruction of all moral values in society starts with taking the woman's mind over, okay? Because they've been in the traditional role throughout history as the nurturer and the one who is going to instill moral values into the child, okay, by teaching them. Especially since traditionally women stayed with the child. Now with women in the workforce, there's nobody except the state schools to basically instill so-called values into the child. And what's getting instilled in those schools? Social Darwinism. The worship of money, the worship of the state. That's what's getting instilled into children. Scientism, a total left-brained so-called education, which is a total indoctrination system of 50,000 hours of compulsory schooling with a child away from both parents. When you have parents who have not been raised with moral values, and the only thing that they've been taught to value is money. That's the value system, money. Where do you expect society to go? You expect it to become more free? You expect people to do great things in a free capacity? Expect it to go into chains, which is exactly where it's at. And, I tell people, let's make it personal. I don't need to go to anybody else or talk about anybody else as an example. Let's talk about my own family. My own family are completely ensconced and entrenched in a satanic mindset. Every member of my family except me. Maybe with the exception of one or two others who I would consider very semi-awake and aware and not really active. But in general, the entirety of my own family are in a satanic mindset. never focusing on anything but me, 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 all day long, every day. The women of my family don't care about rights. They don't care about freedom. They don't care about what's going on around them. And the only thing they tell their children is go out and make enough money. The only thing that my own mother was ever concerned with is whether I was making enough money or had a quote job. That's it. No involvement in any aspect of emotional or spiritual life whatsoever. Certainly not trying to raise me to an accurate and deep understanding of morality at all. Zero. Never mentioned it. No, just go along with the program, go along with the system, follow the rules, because you have to come out on top because you have to make enough money. That's all. Physical creature comforts, yeah, sure, taken care of. As if that's all there is to the raising of a child. And you have millions and millions, hundreds of millions of people doing this, so-called raising their children like this, thinking that physical creature comforts are the only thing that a child needs met. That's it. Nothing else. So what surprise is there when we have totally inauthentic men and women in society that were never raised, that have no connection to the true self? And what I want to talk about is what women have been socially conditioned to desire, to want. Because that plays a huge role in what's going on. A gigantic role. What the inauthentic, socially conditioned woman, which is the vast, overwhelming majority of most women, want the corporate, inauthentic man. That's what they desire in society. And so the corporate, inauthentic man, the ones that will go down that path and play ball with the system, most women will gravitate toward that. Toward the guy who is compliant, has been emasculated by the system, by government, and is completely compliant with all the rules and regulations, because they'll basically make their image into what their corporate masters want them to be, and then fall in line with whatever behaviors their corporate masters want from them. And most men will just do it because what most men in our society want is for women to be interested in them and paying attention to them. And that's what they're living their lives to try to accomplish. Not trying to get at the truth, not trying to understand what's going on in the world. They're chasing the inauthentic woman for the vast majority of their lives. And so they want to reinvent themselves into their corporate master's version of what a man should be. To look like they want them to look. To act like they want them to act. It's pathetic. And these aren't real men. They don't resemble real men in any way. And neither do the women who want men who are corporate doormats. And in general, that's what modern women want. They want either they want a corporate doormat that they can use as a resource, or they want a total dominator. And this all stems from either wanting to be in the position of control or wanting to be controlled. The vast, overwhelming majority, not all. There are some genuine, authentic women and genuine, authentic men left in this world, but the numbers are waning and dwindling, folks. And that's what the social engineers want. And how they put this idea into women's mind. This idea of you have to get the person who's the most successful in society. I have a question for listeners. I'd like to pose a question that is a social experiment I've done to try to highlight this dynamic. And folks, I realize how controversial this is. And I said it from the beginning. I'm not going to shy away from this. What I'm going to say needs to be said, and I'm going to say it anyway. Okay? It doesn't make a difference who's offended or alienated by this. If you think this paints some kind of negative light on my work, well, turn it off. Don't listen to it anymore. It doesn't make a difference. The truth remains the truth, and this is still going on. I'd like for people to call in because I have a question to pose. Somebody wants to answer an off-the-cuff question, a blind question that I want to put out there to try to highlight a dynamic I want people to understand. The call-in number to join us is 800-313-9443. Once again, the call-in number, 800-313-9443. We actually have a caller on the line. I'm going to go to them in the next segment after the top of the hour because I have a question that I want to pose. And I think it will highlight this dynamic of why there's such a absolute degradation of moral values in our society and how women have largely played into that as a result of social engineering. I'm not saying men haven't either, but very much so this dynamic has targeted women. These social engineers know exactly what they're doing, folks. Stay with us. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening. Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening here on RBN. We're into the second hour of the show for this evening. I'm your host, Mark Passio. My website, whatonearthishappening.com. We're continuing our series on the Neo-Feminist Agenda as a eugenics operation, what I call an example of Epi-Eugenics. Eugenics that is carried out through mind control. This is about the mind control specifically targeted at women to foment a war between the sexes. And that is the elephant in the room that hardly anybody wants to really get into and talk about on any kind of a deep level. Help people to understand the think tanks and occult groups that are directing this agenda, how it works, the type of conditions that it has led to in our society, and what we can do about it. But again, I said I've been studying this dynamic for years now, and I finally felt that the time was right to bring this information forward because I consider it a moral obligation to talk about this when I understand the dynamic that is going on so well, and very, very few people do. Neo-feminism constantly wants to tout the notion that the sexes aren't equally as oppressed in our culture, that our freedoms aren't being destroyed all around the board, men and women. They put out this notion that everything is because of patriarchy. Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, we don't live in a patriarchy or a matriarchy. I mean, if you believe that, you've bought into the dialectic. We live, ladies and gentlemen, in an occultocracy. That's the nature of the ruling class that generally completely dominates and controls and enslaves the rest of the population. People want to call it a patriarchy, a matriarchy, this and that, a corporatocracy, an oligarchy. It's an occultocracy. Maybe people have never heard that term before. Well, you have now. It means rule by the occult. Rule by occult means. And folks, if you think the occult, the dark occult, as I refer to the twisted variation, the cult aspects of occulted knowledge being used against people as a weapon, okay? The dark occult and dark occultists are comprised by both men and women, and they're comprised by people from every culture, every walk of life, every age, both sexes, and even just about every social income class. You know, people think it's only the ultra rich. No, the occultists are not all rich. You know, there's people who are involved in generational bloodline families of occultism, and they're not necessarily rich and powerful people. They're powerful when it comes to what they understand about the mind. We're not living in a patriarchy, folks. It's an occultocracy ruled by dark occultists. You know, what I was talking about in the last segment is that, you know, most of the inauthentic women in our society want either a doormat or a dominator. You know, because, again, they're in one form of brain imbalance or another. The vast majority of them are being conditioned to the left brain imbalance because that's masculinizing the woman. And it's also getting the woman to align her so-called values to the state and its so-called values. Put all this stuff in quotation marks, folks. And again, you could put the word woman in quotation marks. So, you know, maybe that'll make it a little bit more palatable. I'm not really talking about a real woman here. You got to understand that. Every time I'm using the term woman when I connect it in with the Neo-Feminist Agenda, you have to understand I mean the inauthentic, mind-controlled woman that has nothing to do with what a real woman is at all. Zero. And unfortunately, the inauthentic woman comprises the vast majority of women in our population. Yes, that is a generalization, but it is a true generalization. The social engineers have done their job well, and they know what they're doing, and they know how to do it. You know, this is done through movies, television, magazines, media, the news, the daily news that people absorb. You know, you just look through society, and I'm telling you right now, all you have out there is television watchers, folks. You got people who sit in front of that garbage device day in and day out, rotting their brain, and they think it's telling them something that resembles truth. The genuine being, the genuine human being, the genuine man, the genuine woman is not involved in any aspect of the game of control, whether on the side of being a dominator or being a doormat. And no genuine man or woman would want somebody to play either one of those roles. A real relationship involves control not being involved in it. And unfortunately, that's what modern day relationships have all become about. Control. But I have a question I want to ask the listening audience. I've done a social experiment over the last several weeks on my own time, where I asked approximately 75 people, 75 individuals, this question that I'm going to pose to a caller blindly right now. Okay? And I won't tell you what the results are. Okay? Let's actually go to the phone line so I could pose this question, and I'll tell you a little bit more about the social experiment that I did. Let's hear from Phil in Oregon. Phil, I know you may have called in to pose some other question, but I want you to hold off on that question for now, and I want to ask you a question, okay? And if you still have a question or a comment that you want to make, I'll bring you back on later, okay? You could hold, and I'll bring you back in. But I'd like to pose a question blindly to you, and could you just confirm I haven't asked you this question, have I?
No, I'm kind of excited.
Okay, we didn't talk at all or pre-rehearse this in any way, okay? I'm just bringing Phil in because he's the first in the call queue, and I just want to ask you something, okay? I've asked 75 people so far this question, all right, as a social experiment. In a modern-day interaction between a male and a female, after the social niceties and pleasantries are exchanged at first, could you tell me the first question, invariably, that the woman poses to the man in that interaction?
Oh, man. Let me think.
Almost invariably, the first question that a woman in modern society will pose to a man after, the general pleasantries are exchanged, like, what's your name, where are you from, what's the next question that comes up?
Oh, I got it.
Go ahead.
What do you do for demon coin slavery points?
Thank you, Phil. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this deeply explains the dynamic that I'm talking about here. Okay? Phil, I'm going to let you go. I want to thank you for giving that answer, okay? And I want to tell people the result of this experiment. If you want to hold on the line, you're welcome to do that, and I'll bring you on for a question or comment after when I go to the phones, if I go to the phones. But thank you. Thank you for allowing me to ask you that question blindly. Okay.
Thank you.
So, of course, the answer to that question is, what do you do for a living? What do you do to make money? Okay, that's the first question. Now, that's person 76 that I've posed that question to in the last several weeks. And I'll tell you the result of that little social experiment on the other side of this break. Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to What on Earth is Happening. Stay with us.
I've got to run to keep from high, and I'm bound to keep on riding. I've got one more silver dollar. We don't need no education. We don't need no thought control. No dark sarcasm in the classroom. Teacher, leave them kids alone.
Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening here on RBN. I'm your host, Mark Passio. My website, whatonearthishappening.com. Now, before this last break, I think we've hit people with something that is a cornerstone in what I'm trying to explain. And I want to thank Phil from Oregon from answering my question live on the air blindly, okay, not knowing what I was going to ask. And the question was, and I've done a social experiment with this over the last several weeks, and I've posed this question to 75 people. Phil was number 76. And the question was, in an interaction in the modern world between a man and a woman who have just met each other, after they, if they're talking and they exchange pleasantries at the very beginning of the conversation, what is invariably the first question that the female will pose to the male in that interaction? And he answered, what do you do for a living? He worded it a little bit more colorfully. He said, what do you do for demonic coin of the realm, or something to that effect, for fake fiat Federal Reserve notes, But essentially the question remains the same. What is the occupation that you make money doing? Okay? Now, this being the primary foremost question that is posed, what does that say about what is going on in the modern conditioned female mind? Well, we'll get into that in a minute, but let me give you the results of my little social experiment that I've conducted here over the past few weeks. 100% of people that I posed that question to, 76 out of 76, answered the same way. What do you do for a living? 100%. Now, ladies and gentlemen of the listening audience, okay? If I went out on the street corner here in South Philadelphia, and I went on the corner and I just said, I posed the question to 100 people as they walked by, could you please tell me what color the sky is on a cloudless, weatherless day? during the day when not at nighttime, but during the day, on a cloudless, weatherless day, what color is the sky? What color does the sky refract to the human eye? I will almost guarantee you that you will not get 100% of people to answer with the word blue. I will almost guarantee it. Yet 100% of people, you know how difficult it is to get 100% agreement on any question? I mean, you go out on the street corner and ask people, what planet is this that you are standing on? I guarantee you 100% of people won't respond with the Earth. I will almost guarantee it. As crazy as that sounds, trust me, you will find somebody that will give a different answer. To get 100% agreement on asking that many people anything is unimaginably extraordinary and says volumes about this social dynamic. It speaks volumes. And the reason for this is because the utmost thing in the mind of most people, and I will say this is true for both men and women, but it's overwhelmingly the case for the conditioned woman in society, and everybody will make excuses for this, and they'll have justifications, till the end of time, because they won't want to look at this dynamic honestly. They won't want to look at it honestly, what this means, what this says, societally, is going on psychologically within the minds of the vast overwhelming majority of socially conditioned, socially engineered females. What they are saying is, my value system is based in money. Get as offended about it as you want. I don't care what anybody says about that. It's the truth. That is what that dynamic is saying psychologically. Now let me ask the listeners out there this question, okay? Could you pose a hypothetical reason for me to contemplate and for the other listeners to contemplate? Could anybody out there tell me why the first question that does not come up in conversation between a man and a woman interacting socially in our society, that the woman would ask to the man, or that the man would ask to the woman for that matter, is, do you know the difference between right and wrong behavior definitively? Or in other words, are you a truly moral being? Why isn't that the first question that's asked? Why isn't that the first question that's asked, ladies and gentlemen? Want to know why? Because most people don't give a damn about that. At all. At all. That's why. That's the truth. I don't need anybody to hypothetically answer the question. I know what the answer to the question is. Because their values aren't based in anything that is a real value. It's based on an illusion called garbage, nonsense, fake fiat money. That is nothing but a control system for the mind and behaviors and emotions. And I guarantee you we'll get tons of excuses and tons of justifications about that. I'm a misogynist for bringing that up. Don't you know? It's because money is the value system that they have been taught, and that's the value system they've retained. Morals? Oh, who gives a damn? I don't need to know anything about that, Do you condone or support violence against other people by your support of the state? No, I don't need to know anything about that. Because invariably 99.9% of these people all do support the state. They're statists. Now, here's my question, folks. Let's get to the underlying psychological factor that's going on there. Let's get to the underlying psychological causal agent, the causal factor of what's taking place in the manipulated, conditioned female psyche. Again, folks, one of the things I want to re-emphasize that I talked about last week is we have to understand that this is not human nature. And many men are absolutely just as brainwashed and conditioned and mind-controlled and socially engineered. My contention would be that more men are out of that conditioning than women are, by a small percentage. But we have to get to the underlying psychological reasons for this. We'll pick this up on the other side.
You know the day destroys the night, night divides the day. Try to run, try to hide, break on through to the other side, break on through to the other side, break on through to the other side, yeah.
Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening here on RBN. I'm your host, Mark Passio. My website, whatonearthishappening.com. You know, we've pretty much struck a nerve when it comes to the dynamic that I'm talking about regarding neo-feminism and the socially conditioned mindset of the overwhelmingly vast majority of women in our society, and the value system that really shows that most people are in, which is no values at all. You know, it's the worship of money, and moreover than that, it's deeply beyond that, because we have to get past just the symptoms and understand what the underlying social psychological factors that are really going on in most people's minds, okay, especially the female mind, which is part of an overwhelmingly important part of what perpetuates statism in our society and perpetuates everything that goes along with statism, which is the continued condoning of violence and oppression and slavery in our world. And I'm going to put out there the argument that the overwhelming mass of females in our society want that to continue. They love the state. They cannot get enough of it. And I'm not saying that most men aren't statists as well, because they most certainly are. But I'm saying it's almost entirely has a hold over women's minds, as opposed to men who seem to be coming out of the statist mindset a lot faster. I know that's a controversial statement to make, but look, the numbers are there in the observation. Just go out and look at who's out there telling the truth about statism as being a complete illusion. How many men are doing that versus how many women are doing that? I mean, I don't think anybody would call into this show or try to debate at all anywhere that the overwhelming numbers of people involved in the truth movement are men. The ratio is wildly skewed. If I had to guess, I would say it's a minimum of 10 to 1. And I'm probably being extraordinarily generous in that estimation. I'd say more likely than not, it's actually closer to 20 to 1. You know, which it speaks volumes. All you have to do is go out in any group of activists and observe. And I'm talking about for, like, you know, really things that are anti the state. Of course, there are activist groups that are comprised largely of women. I'm talking when it comes down to telling the real truth about this entire corrupt, immoral system. Because most women gain benefit from that system from being in place and want it to continue. They don't want the state to come down. It's why the state is constantly, trying to justify their existence in their minds and tell them how much they need them, because it is like the state's trying to prop itself up as the actual real masculine man image, and say, you need us. And here's the underlying psychological dynamic that I'm talking about. What are we really talking about, folks? Why does a woman in a first interaction with a male ask the question, what do you do for a living? What's being actively sought psychologically? What are they revealing about their condition that they're in? Let me just say this as an aside. Do you know there are people who I know and have known for years that I still don't know what they do, quote, for a living? I hate that term. What do you do for a living? As if you wouldn't be able to live without doing this, As if somehow all of life is dependent on the flow of money and whether you're in some corporate slave job. I hate the term, what do you do for a living? For a living. What do I do for the fake garbage Federal Reserve notes that people so believe in as a religion? As a false religion? That morons believe in as a false religion? So, I lost my train of thought there. I was saying, the underlying psychological dynamic that, is going on here. And how wildly, skewed truth-telling is in the truth movement. And the ratio that exists between men and women, this dynamic of, what do you do for a living? Where is that coming from? I mean, I would never, I was saying there are people who I know who I have never even asked that question to. I've never posed the question to actual friends that I have. People that I've known for years. I've actually gone up to them and said, how long have I known you? And someone replied to me, oh, about 5 or 6 years now, it's got to be. And I said, I have no idea what type of job you do during the day at all. Never asked them one time, because I don't care about that. Why would I care about what fake nonsense that someone is made to go through, is coerced really to go through, okay, by this society to make, absolutely fake nonsense money that isn't backed by any real intrinsic value whatsoever? Why would I care what someone who's in the same basic slavery position as I'm in when it comes to having to have an amount of that dynamic in your life to be able to just get any food or services at all? Okay? And why would that be somehow determining what, how I interact with that person? I'm not concerned about what somebody does for their job at all in any way, because that's not what makes somebody a person I want to know or not at all in any way. I honestly don't care what they do, as long as I know that they're a good person and they're fighting the good fight of freedom and getting involved in doing the great work in some capacity. That's what I care about. I want to know whether someone's awake. I want to know whether someone knows what's going on in the world. I want to know whether someone is conscious. I want to know whether someone cares about what's going on in the world. Not how many fake Federal Reserve notes they can accrue. There are people in my life who I've known for years I've never even posed the question to. I don't know what they do, and I don't even want to know. And yet this is the first and foremost things on the minds of most people. Because what they are trying to get at is how much money do you make? And that there's a reason for that. Psychologically, what's going on in their mind? Now, I want to go to another caller and ask them this question. Okay? So I'm going to go back to the phone lines, and I'm going to bring somebody else on, and I want them to try to answer the question, what psychologically is going on in the minds of someone who poses a question, the first question they ask somebody else, because they think there might be, some kind of interaction or attraction or whatever, and, in pursuing some sort of any kind of a relationship. The first thing that they want to know is, what do you do for a living? Okay? I want to know the psychological dynamic that is taking place there. What psychologically is going on? So I'm going to bring on Donna from Los Angeles. And Donna, if you have another comment or question, I'm going to ask you to hold it for now. I'll go back to you if we go to the phones tonight. And I want to ask you, what do you think is the psychological dynamic that is going on there with the vast majority of women who pose this question? And again, I'm not trying to debate whether that is the answer to the question. 76 out of 76 people answered that question the same way. So clearly that is a dynamic that is taking place. Whether you want to argue that it's, that's happening all the time everywhere is not the point here. What I want to ask you is, in that dynamic that is taking place, what do you think psychologically is going on with socially conditioned people who are posing that question? Can you tell me what you think they are looking for?
Okay, well, I think when a woman says, I want to know what this guy does for a living, if he's going to be my potential, partner in life or my husband, they're looking for some type of financial stability. I think. Okay,
so now what is that dynamic psychologically? Financial stability translates psychologically to what in the mind?
Maybe having someone to help take care of you, someone who will, make the, take away the problems.
Right.
Make things
what
a
are
lot
these
easier
all
for
forms
you.
of? Get to the actual word. Tell me what this is all a form of seeking.
I'm not really sure, actually, because...
Well, if you want financial stability, if you want somebody to take, quote, care of you, okay? If you want, there to be resources present when you need them, tell me what you're psychologically seeking. Are you psychologically seeking goodness and virtue? Are you psychologically seeking morality? Are you psychologically seeking freedom?
No,
no. Okay, correct.
Yeah.
You're correct. The answer to those questions are no. Well, then what is being sought?
Well, it's almost like an exchange. Women who buy into this, and believe me, I'm not one of them, but women who buy into this, it's basically they're exchanging their liberty and their freedom for a false sense of security, a false sense of, it's going to all work out. I'm not going to.
You just said it. Thank you. Donna, you just said the word I was looking for. Security. Mm-hmm. Or, in other words, safety. Security, right. Or safety. That's what's psychologically being sought.
Yeah.
Now, Now, and I'm going to let you go on that note, and I want to thank you for calling and allowing me to ask you a question blindly, and thank you so much for, exploring that dynamic with me. Hold on the line if you want to get back to asking a question or making a comment if and when I take calls later in the show. So thank you, Donna.
Thank you, Mark.
You got it. So, there's the dynamic, folks. Safety. Now, the next question becomes, psychologically, what kind of people, first and foremost, are looking for safety over any higher values? We'll explore that on the other side of the break, folks. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening here on Republic Broadcasting. I'm your host, Mark Passio. My website, whatonearthishappening.com. So before the break, I talked to Donna from Los Angeles, and we were trying to get at the root psychological dynamic that is going on in the minds of people that of women in society who are focused on simply, what a guy does for a living, and we talked about I did a social experiment of this being asking 76 people what the first question a woman asks a man in an encounter between a woman and a man who have just first met. After the initial pleasantries are exchanged, what does the woman invariably ask the man first? And 76 out of 76 people answered, "What do you do for a quote living?" You can't get that kind of agreement on what color the sky is during the day. And so, I asked the question, well, why is that? What are they seeking psychologically? What's going on in the psyche that would make someone be so conditioned and so focused on that dynamic first out of all the other things you could possibly know about a human being? And the answer is what they're seeking is safety, security. Because in their minds, in their socially conditioned minds, money translates to security in society. Now, that obviously is not true, because we're going into a police state, where violence is everywhere. You're not safe just because you have a lot of money. We're losing our freedom, and that makes you not safe and in a condition of chaos when you don't have freedom. Money's not going to solve that problem. Hey, natural disasters can happen. Does natural disaster, does a tsunami rolling in off the coast say, "Oh, that person's house is, they clearly make, a couple $100,000 a year. I'll skip over that house." A tsunami doesn't say that. And most certainly neither does an asteroid or a comet that's bearing into the earth. It's not going to say, "Well, I'll take out all the poor people, when I strike," but, we'll let the rich go. We'll let them, continue, and we won't affect them. People don't understand there's no such thing as safety. There's no such thing as guarantee of safety. It doesn't exist. It's an illusion. And there you have what I'm trying to establish here. Socially engineered people like this, and particularly this extraordinarily socially engineered aspect of society, namely modern, inauthentic, conditioned women, are chasing an illusion. They're chasing something that does not exist because of an ingrained belief system that somehow money will make you secure for your life. How about all the wives of all the people, all the men who were part of Enron? I'll bet you they all were asked in the situations that they were in with women, "What do you do for a living?" And when they said, "I'm part of a really new, awesome energy company that's going to storm the world. It's going to take the world by storm." I'm sure you had plenty of them that were so ecstatic about that, they were beside themselves. What happened with that? Where was the security? That could happen to any company. Any company could go down. Money doesn't create security in a society, folks. If you believe that, you are under mind control. And your religion of choice is the monetary system. Because that's where all of this is coming from, folks. Getting people to make their religion the monetary system. And you know what? That's satanic. Because that's all about where's my personal power, since this is believed in as power in our society and the ability to do things. Even the ability to have basic needs met like eating. The monetary system. The God of this world. The ultimate religion. The religion that even people who have kicked statism still buy into. And it's all equally sewage. It's sewage for the brain, it's sewage for the emotional makeup, and it's sewage for the soul. And yet that's where these people's mindset is at. That's where their mindset is. And I'm telling you, it's the vast, overwhelming majority. I'd say it's well over 99% of women think that way. And I'm not just making a wild estimate or trying to be harsh. I'm just being honest in my assessment. If 76 people out of 76 people answered the question the same way, you have to understand that this dynamic is totally widespread. It's omnipresent. It's beyond just widespread. It's everywhere. Chasing the illusion of safety. And here we go, folks. Just extend that outward, and then we have the acceptance of the state by the vast, overwhelming majority of women. Well, of course, if you're going to accept the monetary system as your main value system, well, it's a logical progression that you're going to accept the state as your, quote, protector, to keep you, quote, safe, quote, unquote, safe. Yeah, they'll just control you with their form of, quote, security, you know? Like Ben Franklin said, those who would give up essential liberty for a little bit of temporary safety will lose both and deserve neither. Only bringing our behaviors into alignment with moral law, with natural law, can ever ensure the safety of a society. And let me tell you something, folks. People who say, well, there'd still be natural disasters and this and that. I firmly look at it exactly the opposite. I think nature is responding to bring suffering to a community, a society, when they become more and more immoral. I think that natural disasters are totally connected with consciousness. And that's what's invariably going to bring a comet down on this world, or a huge asteroid down upon it. Because that's going to be nature's way of saying these people had their chance to learn and come out of their garbage belief systems, come out of their total mind-controlled belief systems that doesn't serve any part of who they are or who they say they want to be, and they've had enough chance. They've had enough chances. They've had enough time. So let's see what you make of this huge space rock. You know, we're going to weed the garden a little bit. We'll pick this up on the other side of the break, folks. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Oh, folks, sorry about the mix-up with the bumper music there. Clearly that's not supposed to be in my bumper music queue. I'll see if I can get them to take care of that on the network side. But no worries. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening. I'm your host, Mark Passio. My website, whatonearthishappening.com. We're into the third hour of the show this evening. And we've been discussing, as we have over the last couple of weeks, the Neo-Feminist Agenda as a eugenics operation. An operation that I refer to as an Epi-Eugenics operation, which is eugenics being waged through mind control and through social engineering in society. I do want to take some calls in the third hour of the show tonight, and I'll give the call-in number to join us for your questions or comments on this topic. The call-in number to join us, 800-313-9443. Once again, toll-free, 800-313-9443. I do want to wrap up some things in this first segment, and then I'll probably go to your calls in the next segment. But we were essentially talking about the degradation of moral values in society and how people don't really care whether somebody is good or bad as long as they make money. Once again, let's just bring this dynamic home to roost, okay? I don't need to go outside of myself and my own experience to prove that this is what's going on in society. My family members did not care about whether I was growing up as a moral being or not, which is why I didn't grow up as a moral being until much later in life. I didn't grow into a moral being until way after I stopped listening to the programming and the indoctrination that my family was giving me about what's real in this world. I had to get out of that whole dynamic because they were making me into more of an immoral person. And you know, some of them will hear that and they'll say, oh, how could you possibly say that? I'm not saying they were evil people who told me to go out and hurt people. But the real difference between right and wrong behavior was never effectively communicated to me. And it's largely never communicated to other people by their family members. And this is because of the propagation of this no values system in our society. And it is my contention that that has really gone into hyperdrive as a result of neo-feminism coming in and taking the minds of most women in our society. I'm not saying it wasn't bad before that. It was already on the decline. But the think tanks that have put, and occult organizations that have put neo-feminism into place in our society in the big way that it is now, it is done to completely destroy the value system of people and put them into a satanic mode of thought, which is me, me, me only worry about my safety, my security, my comfort. And is this not where what you see most, especially young women, talking about and obsessing about? I mean, folks, the inaneness and the vapid form of consciousness that is out there. All you have to do is go to any public place and just eavesdrop in on a conversation that's happening. And I'd suggest it'll work equally with men and women, but in particular, you will hear women only talk about, their creature comforts, their clothes, or, what they are going to do with their friends, or, the soap opera that they watched, or the celebrity who's getting married. It's vapid, inane banter that goes on. There's largely no, and men have the whole sports dynamic going on. Everybody's talking about the Super Bowl as if this matters in your life. I mean, this whole concept of dumbing people down and taking away their morals, just totally infringing on any moral sensibility that they had at all and destroying that. The monetary system is a gigantic part of that, and almost overwhelmingly the vast majority of modern conditioned women have totally bought into that system as their value system. I know my family has. Look, folks, I'm like really the only awake being in my entire family, man or woman. I'm telling you, there are zero females in my family who deeply care about and understand the difference between right and wrong. They are concerned about money and whatever they have to do to get money, and whatever the man in their lives has to do to, quote, make a living. And that's all they care about. They don't care about what's going on in this world. They don't know anything that's going on in this world. They have no knowledge. And this entire concept is totally omnipresent and widespread in our culture. Totally widespread and omnipresent. The desire for security, a total illusion. It's a product of the satanic mindset, ego gratification, me thinking. No care, the destruction of care, the cremation of care. Nobody actually caring on any kind of a wider level. Just worry about my creature comforts. And this leads to women who want men to be around them for nothing else but a resource, to exploit as some form of a resource. Which is why they're so largely concerned with asking that question immediately. It's like a algorithmic response going on in the brain. It's a sizing up. It's a filtration process. Well, is this amount of money going to be good for the lifestyle I want to live? Because I'm not worried about anything that's going on in the world or whether this person's a good person or not. The desire for people to be used as a resource. And I'm not telling you that doesn't go on the other side of the equation too, with men doing that with women. But it is deeply ingrained in our culture for women to do that and for that to be somehow acceptable. You know? Like I said, they're not asking the question, do you know the difference between right and wrong behavior? They're not concerned with that. But they ask that question, what do you do for a living? This all ties into a concept known as hypergamy. Hypergamy. A lot of people may never have heard about it, but it's the installation of this cultural indoctrination of you have to go, the woman has to go out and find a man that can be used as a resource, that makes enough money to act as the provider. You know? And of course, the state is the ultimate form of this. The state is the ultimate form of Big Daddy, provider, in 99.9% of women's mind. You know, they're going to provide safety and security. It will be chaos without them around. You know, this idea, hypergamy is this idea of the woman will marry up to get a guy that has a lot of resources and money at his disposal, because that translates to power and ability in that person's mind. They're not concerned about really what's going on in the mind of that person. Like I said, my family would be ecstatic if I was a multi-millionaire evil Satanist who was trying to murder people through eugenics operations, which is where I probably would have went had I not come out of the satanic mindset that I was in my youth. But I'm sure my family would have no problem with it as long as money was rolling in, you know? And to be honest, most women have no problem with whatever immoral activity their man is doing, their husband, the man in their life, whatever, is doing. They don't care if they're hurting somebody else. The vast majority. I'm making a generalization, yes. I'm saying the overwhelming majority, not all, certainly. And you will not hear me say the word all pretty much in this whole general discussion for weeks. Of course, none of this fits into a blanket statement. But the general mass of people, are they like this? Absolutely. So folks, stay with us. We're going to get to your calls on the other side of the break. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening here on RBN. I'm your host, Mark Passio. My website, whatonearthishappening.com. I think I'm going to leave the presentation portion of the show for tonight right there as it is, and we will continue talking about these topics on next week's show. I'll be continuing to delve into the Neo-Feminism Agenda, the mind control that is specifically, and the social engineering that is specifically targeted toward women to control their perceptions and their ideas of what they want and ideas of attractiveness, etc. You know, we'll talk about a lot of these things, and we'll get into how this has completely really driven a wedge between men and women in our society, and I'll also eventually be getting into some of the lashback that's starting to occur when it comes to different types of men's reaction type movements to this. And that'll be coming up on future shows. In future weeks, I'll also be going back into the importance of gun ownership rights and why it's so important to arm yourself and to know how to use arms. And I'll be, getting into the Second Amendment like I did before, and, talking about that, and really also talking about how a lot of people still don't grasp understand this importance, especially in other countries. Thankfully, here in America, people still are very much into gun ownership and fighting hard every day to retain those inherent natural rights. On future shows, I'll also be talking about the occult history of Nazism. I think I'm going to do an entire series on this and explain a lot of the personalities and groups that were involved in bringing Nazism out of the realm of the occult and turning it into a political ideology, in the 20th century. But we're going to go to the roots of where that came from, and I'll be breaking that down, how that was done and fomented through a lot of different dark occult orders. I'll also be going into solutions again to try to bring a social dynamic to waking people up. A social technique for waking people up. This is what I call maven targeting. I believe it's a phrase that I have coined as well. I haven't heard anybody else use it, but I will explain the concept of what the maven is and why we should try to essentially focus in a group setting on changing the mind of the maven of a social dynamic, particularly a family, if possible. Which would probably be the most effective. Instead of trying to, just wake individuals up, we need to target key people when it comes to waking them up, and then that influence will have a greater effect on other people, because the maven is the person who is essentially, their opinions are listened to. Okay, so that's all coming on future editions of What on Earth is Happening. Just a small, sneak preview of what I'll be getting into in future weeks. Right now, let's go to the phone lines, and I'd like people to comment or talk about, the Neo-Feminism Agenda and aspects of it that I've talked about and covered thus far. I'm not going to totally limit it to that. If you do want to go into other topics or areas of inquiry or discussion, that's fine. But I would personally like to see people ask questions or make comments regarding the material I'm talking about in the current show and last week's show. So let's go to the phone lines. It looks like we have full lines. Let's hear from Phil in Oregon. Phil, you're live on What on Earth is Happening. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Mark, thanks for having me on again. I had to reach for that answer earlier. Had to go into slave think to pull that out.
Yes, it most certainly is, isn't it? Yeah,
man. First of all, I got to thank you. Thank you for suffering, man. We wouldn't be here without it. I want to talk about the men aspect of how they're targeting men in a sec. But I want to say, I noticed that What on Earth is Happening is a piece of high magic, I've noticed.
I want to thank you for that. I mean, I consider that this is all about alchemical transmutation from lower consciousness, base consciousness, to higher consciousness and true awareness. So I kind of like that assessment, and I kind of like that comparison to real magic, because I do consider it that.
It is a piece of high magic. It finally hit me. It's kind of weird you say transmute, because I noticed when I'm in the process of suffering, it's a game changer when you thank the suffering and you have gratitude in that process. It gives it purpose and changes. It's a trip. It really works. But anyway, I want to talk about. I don't know if you have a hipster epidemic in Philly, but
yes. Oh boy,
don't get me started. All right, let's get started on this. All right, man. The emasculated hipster man-child, right? They're everywhere.
It's pretty bad. I mean, that's what they want. They want somebody who, isn't a strong person, physically or mentally. They want someone who doesn't care about gun ownership. They want somebody who doesn't really care about rights, who wants to be trendy. They want somebody who wants to be popular instead of being moral. They want somebody who's going to just take on pleasure pursuits in society and try to go along with the flow and fit in, instead of really standing on their own as a true nonconformist and really going against the flow of this immoral system that we are all enslaved by. They don't want that, and so the hipster mindset is absolutely perfect for that. It's about pop culture, it's about popularity, and it's about, the same type of vapid mindsets that I was talking about earlier,
Yeah, totally. They're like spiritual spiritual invalids and soulless mannequins. Right. They're worried about like fashion and who can wear women's clothing. It's ridiculous, and they're just testicleless man children. And it gets even further with the fashion.
I absolutely love it, and I agree. Continue.
Yeah, me and my roommate were seeing if we can get you to laugh tonight. But anyway, the BPA. The bisphenol A, is that what you say?
Oh, yes. Bisphenol A, yes.
The BPS and the polyester in your clothing, people, the petroleum products, estrogen in the beer, plastic food containers, all these are endocrine disruptors and gender-bending chemicals and estrogen mimickers. If you can get away from that stuff as much as possible, throw away your clothes. Petroleum or polyester, man, it totally turns you into a feminized man. You don't want to fight back. Just like you said, the voice, even the voices are like raising, and it's spooky. It's really spooky.
Many women have actually pointed that out and said that to me, that, you just hear modern men talk and it's like, it doesn't even sound like a masculine voice anymore. They sound like, high pitched, and, a lot of it is the hormones also in meat and dairy, that's pumped into the modern, meat and dairy diet. Huge. It's a huge part of it as well, but absolutely things like bisphenol A and plastics, and, they even put that in printer ink, and, it's in the plastic containers and cups, and, in clothing, as you said. It's a widespread attack. I'm actually going to get into that probably next week to talk about a lot of the ways that, they're turning people into these genderless, slaves. And they're destroying the sex drive, through food, water, radionics, chemtrails is a part of that. We'll pick this up on the other side. Stay with us, everyone. We'll be right back.
There's a code of silence that we don't dare speak. There's a wall between us and a river so deep. We keep pretending that there's nothing wrong. There's a code of silence and it can't go on.
Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening. I'm your host, Mark Passio. My website, whatonearthishappening.com. We're taking your calls until the end of the show this evening. I want to thank Phil from Oregon for a phenomenal call, really bringing up really great points about what is essentially emasculating and feminizing men in our culture. And that's part of this neo-feminist agenda of eugenics, what I call Epi-Eugenics, because they want to eliminate strong male presences in this society, not only for father figures to children, but certainly they want to eliminate the ability of strong men to stand up physically against state tyranny. And that's why a huge interconnection between the neo-feminist agenda is the anti-gun agenda, without any doubt, without any question. And that's why, they lobby to get so many of these neo-feminists to, promote anti-gun agendas and political figures. So let's continue with the callers and go to Donna in Los Angeles. Donna, you're live on What on Earth is Happening. Thanks for holding.
Oh, hi, Mark, again. I just wanted to make a couple points. One is that even though women might be in the minority about this, there's a lot of us who don't believe in this neo-feminist agenda, and we don't like it at all, okay? And we
absolutely. And I actually intend to cover that dynamic. Yeah, Donna, I actually intend to cover that dynamic and explain to people how there are many, many women in our society who are recognizing the dialectical lie of the neo-feministic agenda and are coming out and starting to speak out against it and explaining how this is as much of an anti-woman campaign as it affects the male sex as well. This is completely about the destruction of the familial dynamic between human beings, so that the state has an easier time dominating, controlling, and enslaving people. Make no mistake, that is the ultimate agenda, and the whole concept here is this is done by the occultocracy, ultimately, and the social engineers to put the majority of women into this mindset. Again, this is one of the reasons I have to use terms like the vast overwhelming majority, almost all. Are they generalizations? Of course they are. But, language is kind of, a limited thing. And it's like I have to just keep re-emphasizing that so people don't think I'm talking about all women, and certainly so that people don't think I'm saying that this is the nature of women. I am definitively saying this is not the nature of women. This is the socially engineered condition of women in the modern world. And until we understand how these mind control dynamics work, we're not going to be able to change that condition and bring about healing between the sexes.
Right. Well, for those of us ladies who are awake, we see it as a divide and conquer tactic. We know who, the powers that be, what they're trying to do by dividing and conquering us. Mark, I also wanted to mention, because we've been listening to your show for a long time, and we really are very grateful for all the work you do for exposing, the hidden meanings and the symbolism, that people take for granted. We appreciate you exposing that. I just want to mention real quick, because I know there's other callers waiting, there's quite a few women who are truth seekers and are trying to expose the truth. And I don't know if you're familiar with the work of a Mae Brussel. She had a radio show in the 70s and the 80s, but she was one of the first women to talk about mind control, secret societies, the organized banking cartel, and all this stuff. She was a pioneer for her time. Her name was Mae Brussel.
I'm not familiar with her, but I'm definitely going to become familiar with her based on your recommendation. It sounds like a person who is quite aware, especially around that time. She must have done a whole lot of reading and a whole lot of visiting of libraries in order to become that aware, that long ago. And I will definitely check out her work.
Yeah, and then there's a couple of women who are pretty active today. There's one lady in Veterans Today, Dr. Stuart Jean Bramhall. She's great. Catherine Austin Fitz. She's a financial lady.
Catherine Austin Fitz is pretty great, yes. I'm familiar with her.
There's Daisy Luther. She's the organic prepper. Melissa Melton. She's of Truth Stream Media.
Also. Yep.
With Aaron Dykes and Catherine Frompovich. These are all women writers that I really enjoy reading their work, and it's good to see some of us sisters are awake, and we want to find out what's really going on.
That's
so
right.
I just wanted to share that with you.
Absolutely, Donna. Thank you so much for those recommendations. I will look into many of them, especially Mae Brussel, who you mentioned first. And I just want to say, yes, there are some women who are waking up to this agenda and waking up to the overall control agenda and the overall occult agenda. And I think those numbers just need to continue to grow and grow and grow. And I'll do everything I can to encourage women to step out of their comfort zone and develop some courage to look into what's really going on in this world, and then start to speak it to other people fearlessly, so that they can develop some real security by aligning their behavior to natural law and the great work, because that's what really provides real safety and security of any people in a large social dynamic in the aggregate. So, Don, I want to thank you so much for that call.
Thank you very much, Mark.
You got it.
Okay.
All right.
Bye-bye.
let's continue with some other callers, and let's hear from Avery in Seattle. Avery, you are live on What on Earth is Happening. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, how are you?
Hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right, cool. Hey, man, I've been listening to your show for about a year, and I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate you bringing up this topic of neo-feminism.
Sure. I thought it was high time. I've stayed silent on it for actually years. And, the dynamics that are going on in society are so completely out of control that I said, I can't wait anymore, and I don't care who this may offend, alienate, or make uncomfortable. I understand how controversial of a topic it is and how tensions run hot when things like this, when socio-sexual dynamics like this are brought up, but I cannot stay silent about it any longer, and I will not.
Oh, absolutely. And I must say that, you always pick up, whenever you bring this topic up, which, I have in public before, that's why I'm glad to hear it from you, that you always get that thing like, oh, you're a misogynist, or you're generalizing women into a category of being, you're trying to make them sound like they're bad. But, I'm really, whenever I bring it up to people, I try to make it sound like, well, I think it's due to, people like, mind control, kind of like what you're talking about,
Sure.
where these things on the media, and then you see these things that these young women get into, because, I've got, a girlfriend, my sisters and stuff, and the stuff they get into, you wouldn't even believe it. And I don't know if you pay attention to, the general media, like you'll hear some of these artists, some of these young women get into, like Nicki Minaj, Taylor Swift. You'll see these
Sure.
things they do, and it's just like, oh my God,
And the inane, vapid music and the lyrics, and it's all about, me, accumulation of wealth and status and popularity, and it's just
the
junk.
The men and the woman.
Yep.
Yeah.
They have the youth focused on junk, especially when it comes to pop culture and music.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I try to tell my sisters this stuff too. I say, and my girlfriend, everybody. I say, look, if Taylor Swift wanted to treat herself right when she's talking about this stuff, maybe she should go get a new boyfriend. But one of the points I wanted to bring up was, and I wanted to thank that Phil from, I believe he said he was from Oregon.
Yes.
I'm from, West Coast here, so, I'm in hipster hell, where I get told every time I talk about gun control, I'm a Republican, or, I'm
wow.
this category, actually, I have a friend who's in the freedom movement. Like, he's one of these people that's really into the 9/11 thing, and he was telling me just this week that I sound like Bill O'Reilly.
Wow.
Some conservative.
It's got to be really bad on the West Coast. I could tell you it's horrible here in Philadelphia. And I could only imagine what cities in California must be like. Any conscious people there must be going through total hell, arguably more so than what we're going through here on the East Coast.
Oh, even at I'll go to the Theosophical Society. I'll go to these kind of places too. We got them over here, and I go in there and I start talking about because the guy who works there at the Theosophical shop. He's really into...
Avery, stay with us, and I'll let you continue this line of thought on the other side of this break. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to What on Earth is Happening. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening here on RBN. Last segment of the show for this evening's episode, we were talking with Avery in Seattle. Avery, are you still with us?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, you can continue your line of thought. I think you were talking about, you were trying to explain to some people out on the West Coast the importance of gun ownership and the Second Amendment and the negative responses that you're getting from many of the people there.
Oh, yeah, and I was actually, where I was going with that was even a little further, because I was over at, you're familiar, obviously, with the Theosophical Society.
Yes, I am.
They have a chapter out here, and or whatever you would like to call it. And I went over there. I go over there a lot. They have a lot of different books that I'm interested in. And I was talking to one of the guys because, he's known for being kind of like, he's into, these satanic groups and stuff. Like, he'll talk about it openly, So I approached him, and I was talking to him about, I said, you heard about, the government kind of gets into, the government is directly affiliated with some of these groups and stuff, because you heard of that documentary about, it was Lawrence King. I don't know if you saw that one.
From all of the pedophile scandals that were going on in Nebraska, and his connection with, I think, what was it, Boys Town?
Yeah.
Is that who you're talking about? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's part of the Conspiracy of Silence, as it was called in the documentary. I can't remember the book. John DeCamp was the author of the book, who kind of exposed it. He was a Nebraska state senator who found out about this pedophile ring going on from money scandals that were taking place within the Nebraska state legislature.
And he, so I'm bringing some of the stuff up about how the government might, it's been obvious that they have a lot of ties. This guy is someone who talks about it openly, and he was telling me that, no, that's just conspiracy. And I'm like, well, what do you mean that's conspiracy? I'm like,
how about all the stuff coming out about how, the royal family is involved in covering up pedophilia and actively involved in it? The Jimmy Savile stuff that has all come out, and the other pedophiles, that are part of, Parliament in the English government. This is all breaking, and he doesn't think that this is happening, Yeah,
no. Oh, God, yeah. Well, because the funny thing is, I'd hear him talking about this stuff, and me and him have talked before. So I was talking about how, the government seems to have a lot of ties, because obviously I believe that, but, presenting it to somebody, I kind of, I waited for him to say something first, so then I bring it up, and then he shot me down and looked at me like I was like yelling that there was a fire in the pool or something. He was like, what? Nah, dude, that's just conspiracy. And I'm like, this is the Theosophical Society. Have you ever picked up a book by, Helena Blavatsky? She gets, she talks a lot about things like this and stuff. And I was like, I couldn't believe that this guy was just like kind of shooting me down like that, And,
well, I mean, if he is in the know and he does take part in dark occultism, of course he would want to discourage anybody from looking into material like that. The book that I was trying to think of, I just realized, was The Franklin Cover-Up by John DeCamp. I highly recommend people read that book because it exposes a lot of the pedophilia that's going on within government and how government has ties to satanic networks. And, also I'd recommend the book The Ultimate Evil, that exposes how satanic hierarchies are at work in our society. And, that was about all the disinfo that went around about the Son of Sam killings, David Berkowitz, etc., and tells the real story behind that and how it was all directed by satanic networks. But The Franklin Cover-Up is a book I would recommend to anybody who wants to understand the connections between, pedophilia and high-level government officials. And I would suggest that it does a pretty good job of tying that into, occult rituals and, the satanic network, the hierarchical network of Satanists and dark occultists I've been talking about since basically day one.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it's just, watching those documentaries and just, thinking like, how does someone just watch this and walk away, just like, oh, it's, I guess like they don't think about it twice or anything, because that kind of thing, and that's the whole thing too. I think with the Neo-Feminist Agenda is kind of telling women, especially the younger ones, that men don't have feelings. Men are like these, almost like psychopathic characters. Right. You need to avoid, and you have to become the man and take a stand against them.
And the whole men just should suck everything up. There should be no outlet for any kind of emotional turmoil that most men are going through. It's like a double standard. It's like saying those types of emotions are fine for women, but men should just suck it up and deal with it, and not have any outlet for any of that. It's a big part of, the devastation of real care and compassion within our society. You know, most people who are in this mindset don't care about the suffering anyone else goes through. You know? And that's the sad fact of the matter. Until we change that dynamic, don't expect the external reality that we're experiencing to change.
Absolutely, you know, and the caring female figure that really, you know, I can tell you could really trying to kill because, you know, they want the women. I've noticed this a lot too. Like when I was hearing you talk about this is real. You know, the women trying to become the man. But you know what? Like it's
beyond even just masculinizing them and getting them to become the quote man. It's they want them to act as robots in our society. They want them completely conditioned and desensitized and having no compassion. They want that from men too. You know, that's going on obviously within the realm of the police and the military and the dominator figures who are, you know, total supporters, and not just supporters of, but they're the people who are holding up the state through the violence and through the coercion that they do. You know, so they want it on both sides, but without any question, the Neo-Feminism Agenda in particular is to get women into that non-caring mindset.
Oh, and absolutely, and then have the state become the dad. I mean, that's what it really ends up. That's what like you said. You know, the state then just comes in and gives the money, and now that you have to listen to all the, you know, they just play the daddy role. I really liked when you said that last week, and it really stuck with me, because that's really what does happen, and I've noticed that. Very true.
And so much of this is about parental abandonment issues. So many women fall into this mindset because in some form or fashion, their parents failed them and did not provide for them mentally, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually. And they're falling into this mindset as a result of bad parenting and parental abandonment, you know, in some form. It doesn't have to be physical parental abandonment. The abandonment issue, the abandonment issues that are going on in our society cannot be psychologically overstressed. We have to understand those abandonment issues, work with them, and heal them if we're going to transform society for the better.
You can notice it through the generations, too. I knew this one girl who, her mom, you know, didn't want to be with any guy. She said she hated men. And then now she goes out and spewing that, and she has troubles with men, and she gets with abusive guys or guys who are, you know, off or you know, sketchy, and you can see how it can move through the generations, especially through those younger women, you know, and they're really, it starts, you know, you start with those kids, the kids' parents, and then now they're spreading it, and now they're having.
That's right.
And now
it's part of the abuse victim cycle that we've also talked so much about on this show. And breaking that cycle is very difficult because it requires deep introspective knowledge of the human psyche, which is part of what they want to continue to occult from human beings and dissuade them from ever looking into the self. Avery, I want to thank you so much for your call. Absolutely great insights that you brought up there. A lot of food for thought. Let's hear from Frank in West Virginia. Frank, you're live on What on Earth is Happening. Welcome.
I really appreciate the many points you've made concerning human relationships.
Sure.
And how the society works. It's some pretty practical sociology. And,
I hope it's making sense in a practical way, and a lot of the patterns that we're seeing are coming together, and people are understanding why this is being done by these social engineers. At least I hope it's coming across that way.
Well, it is, and very few are speaking it. I've spoken on these topics that you have brought up and raised tonight in a number of different forums, public forums, and I found that it is true. There's a particular worldview that is common here in America that you'll find people are raised from little children all the way up. They either see through example.
Frank, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this edition of What on Earth is Happening. Thanks so much for your points. Call back in next week. I'll bring you back on the air. Folks, remember, there's only 2 mistakes you can make on the path to truth: not starting and not going all the way. Thanks for listening. We'll see you right here next week.
Don't